Hello, my frontier of knowledge. Welcome to this session with Mr. Soup. Today, we are going to understand something interesting in biology, and this is the most delicate and vital system of the human body. Okay, so this is what we call the nervous system. Therefore, we need to understand that this system deals with what we call transmitting messages throughout the body via the nerves. Now, apart from that, you need to understand that the nervous system is divided into two, of which we are saying it is divided into what we call the central nervous system and the peripheral system. Therefore, we need to understand that under the central nervous system is actually made up of what we call the brain and the spinal cord, as well as the peripheral system is just the system that consists of what we call the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. Remember that all these, the cranial and the spinal nerves, are throughout the human body. Okay. Apart from that, you need to understand to say, in as far as we are trying to talk about the nervous system being divided into two, of which we are saying it is divided into the CNS, which is the central nervous system, and it is also divided into what we call the peripheral system, which is made up of the cranial and the spinal nerves, which surrounds our body. Therefore, you need also to understand to say a bunch of nerves, remember the nerve cells? The bunch of nerves makes up what we call a neuron, and a neuron is just a structural unit of the nervous system. So a neuron is just a structural unit of the nervous system. Now, you need to understand before you can look at the types of neurons, but we need also to understand what we call the structure of a neuron or the structure of neuron. Therefore, this is the good example of the neuron that we can focus on and understand the parts of this particular neuron before we can actually talk about the types in the next video and talk about their function and also try to give the difference between the hormonal system and the nervous system. Okay, so remember that this is a good presentation of the diagram of the neuron. Remember, a bunch of nerves makes up what we call a neuron, and this is a good example of a neuron. And some of the parts that are there on the neuron, we have what we call the dendrites, we have what we call the cell body, and we have what we call the axon, and we also have what we call the myelin sheath, and we have what we call the node of Ranvier, and we also have what we call the axon terminal. So these are the axons terminal, of which these end parts here are also known as the nerve endings. These are some of the things that you need to understand. So remember that before we can talk about the types and their function, these are some of the things that we need to understand. So this is just the introduction to the new topic, of which I'm going to make sure that we draw all the types of neurons. Remember, we have three common types of neurons, of which we have the functional name and the structural names. So we have the functional names, which are the sensory neuron, and we also have the relay neuron, and we also have what we call the motor neuron. These are functional names, and their structural names. We also have the multipolar, bipolar,